The rain hit the glass like soft fingers tapping a secret. Chisholm sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the message again. 2.5 million naira. 1 week. Pretend to be my wife. No intimacy required. Total discretion. At first she thought it was a scam. Or a prank. Or maybe both. But the message came from a verified number. She had checked. Twice. And then again. Her rent was overdue. Her mother needed her prescription. Her sister's school threatened to expel her. Her boss at the restaurant had cut her hours again. And now this. A stranger offering money she'd never even imagined. Just to pretend. She replied, "Where and when?" He sent a car. Black. Sleek. The kind of car that didn't drive on potholes, it floated. Chisholm sat in the back seat, heart pounding. Legs crossed tightly like that could hold her anxiety together. Her gown was borrowed. Her makeup minimal. But she looked composed. She had learned that trick from life, how to look strong even when you're breaking inside. The car pulled up in front of a mansion in Banana Island. White walls, tall gates, quiet luxury. A young man opened the door before the driver could. "You must be Chisholm," he said. His voice was smooth, low, like it knew how to hide things. He was not what she expected. He wasn't old. Maybe early 30s. Tall. Neatly trimmed beard. Eyes that didn't smile. "Come in," he said, turning. No small talk. No pleasantries. Inside, the air smelled like sandalwood and cold secrets. "I'm Kelechi," he said, finally sitting. "This is simple. My grandfather's will is being read in 6 days. He left an inheritance, an estate, conditional on me settling down. The family expects to meet my wife." Chisholm blinked. "So, I just play along for a few days and then walk away?" "Yes, walk away. Paid in full. No complications. No entanglements." She stared at him. "Why me?" He paused. His eyes scanned her face. "Because you look like someone they'll believe I love." She didn't know what to say to that. The silence stretched. Then Kelechi stood and handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a diamond ring. Heavy. Cold. "Put it on," he said. Her fingers shook as she slid it in. Perfect fit. "From now on," he said, "your name is Mrs. Chisholm Kelechi Obesai. For the next 7 days, you are my wife." She looked up at him. This strange man. This stranger in a castle of quiet sadness, and something flickered in his eyes. Something buried. She couldn't name it yet. But she would. Soon. And on the first night, as she opened the door to the guest room, she heard him whisper down the hallway, "Just 1 week. That's all I need." The morning sunlight spilled like gold across the marble floors of the Obesai estate. Chisholm had barely slept. The bed was soft, too soft, like guilt wrapped in cotton. She sat at the edge now, staring at her reflection in the vanity mirror. The diamond ring still shimmered on her finger, heavy with everything it meant and everything it didn't. A knock. She turned sharply. "Come in," she said, adjusting the silk robe someone had laid out for her. It was Kelechi. He looked different in the daylight. Less like a businessman and more like a boy who had forgotten how to smile. Dressed in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbow. He stood in the doorway with the quiet confidence of someone used to control. "We're having brunch with the family at 11, he said. "Wear something soft. My mother likes soft." Chisholm raised an eyebrow. "Soft?" He gave a half-smile. "Gentle. Feminine. The kind of look that says, he found someone his grandmother would approve of." She stood and walked past him toward the closet, letting her silence speak. The walk was slow, deliberate, a performance already beginning. By 11, she was a new woman. The dress was pale blue chiffon, minimal makeup, pearls. She looked like a woman born for wealth, even though her bank account had barely survived last week. They entered the family garden hand in hand. Kelechi's grip was steady but not affectionate. The others were already seated, his mother, 2 cousins, an uncle with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. The moment Chisholm walked in, conversation paused. "Ah," said his mother, rising. "You didn't tell us she was this beautiful." Chisholm smiled the way she used to for difficult customers. Sweet, practiced, unreadable. Thank you, Ma. I've heard so much about you. The brunch was a minefield of questions disguised as politeness. How did you meet? What does your family do? Where did you school? Are you planning children soon? Kelechi answered most of them with the charm of a seasoned liar. But when he said, "We met at a mutual friend's gallery in Abuja," Chisholm turned to him and smiled, this time for real. He was good. Too good. After dessert, his mother pulled her aside. "He hasn't smiled like this in years," she said quietly. "Thank you for softening him." Chisholm froze. What had he been before? Later that evening, back in the guest room, she found a note on her pillow. It was short. "Thank you for today. You played the part better than I hoped." She stared at the words, the handwriting slightly shaky, the paper thick like wedding stationery. She told herself this was a job, a script. But then, why did her heart beat a little faster every time he looked at her like she wasn't just acting? And why, at exactly midnight, did she find herself standing outside his door, hand half raised to knock when she suddenly heard a sound? A muffled cough, then a groan, and then glass shattering. Her hand dropped. Her eyes widened. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Chisholm stood frozen in the hallway, the echo of shattering glass still humming in her ears. The house was silent again, eerily so. No movement, no voice, just the soft hum of the central AC and the heavy weight in her chest. She moved slowly toward Kelechi's door, her bare feet silent against the cold tiles. She raised her hand to knock but paused. Then, quietly, she pressed her ear to the door. Nothing. No cough. No voice. No footsteps. She turned the handle. Locked. Something about the silence behind that door unnerved her more than the sound she'd heard minutes ago. The next morning he was already downstairs. Crisp kaftan, leather slippers, reading the newspaper like nothing had happened. The dining table was set. Pap in porcelain bowls, akara wrapped in gold-edged napkins, and fresh pineapple juice that shimmered in the light. "You slept well?" he asked without looking up. She sat opposite him, watching. "I heard something last night." He looked up. Glass. Coughing. "You?" A pause. Then, "I dropped a cup." Nothing serious. It was a lie, she could feel it. But his eyes held no invitation for questions. She looked away. "You should be more careful." "I am." The words sat between them like a wall. Later that day, while he was out meeting the lawyer, Chisholm wandered through the house. The staff had been given time off. Kelechi insisted they needed privacy this week. For appearances, he said. But now the mansion felt like a museum. Beautiful, expensive, lifeless. On the second floor, she found a hallway she hadn't noticed before. Darker, quieter. At the end of it, a wooden door with a brass handle. She turned it gently. Locked. Again. The second locked room in a house too large for secrets. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from Kelechi. "Don't go into the East Wing. Please." Her fingers went cold. She looked around. No cameras. No staff. How did he know? That evening, the air was heavy with silence. Chisholm stood by the window of the guest room, staring out into the garden. He had barely spoken to her all day. She knew she should be grateful. After all, the job was easy. Dress up. Smile. Pretend. But something about him haunted her. The sadness in his eyes when no one was watching. The way his hands trembled ever so slightly before every public appearance. The way he had whispered just 1 week, like it was a promise to himself. And that locked door. That night she dreamt of a hospital bed, of monitors beeping, of Kelechi lying still, pale, alone. She woke up sweating, and when she stepped into the hallway to clear her head, there he was, standing at the edge of the corridor, barefoot, robe loose, staring at the locked door. His face was blank, his breathing shallow. He didn't see her, but she saw him, and then he opened the door, the one she was told to stay away from. He stepped inside, and the door clicked shut behind him. Chisholm walked toward it, slowly, carefully, one hand against the wall, and just as she reached the handle, she heard the sound that made her blood run cold. Weeping. Not his. A woman's. The weeping was soft, almost tender, like someone trying to remember how to cry. Chisholm stood outside the locked door, her heart pounding in her ears. She pressed her palm gently against the wood, unsure if it was real, or just another layer of mystery in this mansion full of ghosts. Then silence again. Dead. Still. She turned away. She didn't sleep that night. She stared at the ceiling, counting the seconds. The air felt heavier. She couldn't tell if it was the secrets in this house, or the weight of her own curiosity and fear. Morning came, bringing with it a knock on her door. It was Kelechi. His eyes were tired, red-rimmed. He hadn't shaved. His voice cracked slightly as he said, "Let's go out today." She blinked. "Out?" He nodded. "Just us. I want to show you something." They drove without music. The sky hung low with gray clouds, threatening rain. Chisholm glanced at him from time to time, noting the way his hand gripped the steering wheel too tightly. They arrived at a small, quiet beach house, paint peeling, wind chimes clinking in the breeze. Inside it was simple, clean, personal. Pictures lined the fireplace. Photos of Kelechi, younger, smiling. A woman beside him in most of them. She was beautiful, full smile, dimpled cheeks. "She was my fiancée," he said quietly. Chisholm turned. "She died?" she asked, almost whispering. He shook his head. "No, she left. 3 months before the wedding." "Why?" He didn't answer. He just walked to a shelf and picked up a framed photo. "She said I didn't know how to love, that I was too empty inside to give anything real." He stared at the photo for a long moment, then set it down. "I was diagnosed 2 weeks later." Chisholm's breath caught. Diagnosed. Kelechi finally looked at her. "Stage 4 lymphoma. Terminal." The words landed like stone in water. No drama, just quiet devastation. "I didn't tell anyone. Not my family. Not my friends. Only the doctors know. And now you." She stared at him, blinking hard, not sure how to respond. "Why me?" she asked softly. He smiled faintly. "Because I didn't want pity. I wanted to feel normal for one last week. I wanted to pretend that someone could love me, even if it wasn't real." The silence between them stretched until it hurt. And then, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. Thick, sealed. "What's this?" she asked. He placed it in her hand. "The payment. You can walk away now if you want. This wasn't part of the contract." Chisholm stared at the envelope. All the money she ever needed. Every problem solved. And yet, her hand didn't move. Neither did her feet. Because something in her had shifted. Not for the job. Not for the money. For him. That night, back at the mansion, she walked into the east wing while he slept. The door was still unlocked. Inside, soft lighting revealed a room filled with paintings. All of her. Her face. Her smile. Her eyes. Different moods. Different colors. Dozens of portraits. Her hand flew to her mouth. He hadn't just paid her to pretend. He had been watching her, painting her, long before they met. But how? And why? Chisholm stood in the center of the room, surrounded by herself. Not mirrors. Not photos. Paintings. Oils and acrylics. Watercolor sketches. Each one was a version of her. Some smiling, others weeping, one of her sitting barefoot under a mango tree, another curled up on a mat reading a book. She didn't even remember being in those poses. How could he have painted these? She took a slow step forward and touched the edge of a canvas. It was a portrait of her staring out a window, wearing the same expression she wore the day she got the eviction notice on her door. She had been alone that day, or so she thought. The door creaked behind her. She turned. Kelechi stood there, barefoot, eyes shadowed by regret. "You weren't supposed to see this," he said. Her voice was low. "You've been watching me." "No," he said quickly, stepping forward. "Not watching. Not in the creepy way, I swear. I saw you once. Years ago." She frowned. "It was at the General Hospital in Bagada. You were standing outside, holding a small brown envelope, crying, but pretending not to. I sat across the road, waiting for test results. You didn't see me, but I saw you. He paused. His voice softened. And something about you stayed with me. I started painting again that day. You've painted me all these years? She asked, eyes wide with disbelief. He nodded slowly. You became my anchor, my escape. I didn't even know your name until I saw your application on a freelance platform 2 months ago. You were offering to clean houses. That's when I knew it was you. Chisholm felt her throat tighten. You found me online, she whispered, and offered me to play your wife. For money. He stepped closer. I needed someone real. Someone who didn't love me for my name or my money. Someone I already knew had fire. She turned away, her voice trembling. So you knew you were dying, and you still brought me into this lie? I didn't lie, he said. Not to you. I told you from the beginning. Just 1 week. But the truth? I was selfish. I wanted to feel close to someone before I go. She felt a tear slip down her cheek. I was never acting, she said, her voice cracking. Not after the second day. You made me feel seen, like I mattered. He reached for her hand but stopped midway. He dropped it to his side. I still have a few weeks, he said. Maybe months. I don't know. I've stopped the treatments. I don't want to spend my last days in a hospital. She looked at him. Really looked. Behind the strong jaw and tailored clothes was a man unraveling. Brave in silence. Dying without a sound. She stepped forward. Close enough for him to hear her breath. What if I don't want to go? She asked. His voice was barely audible. What if I don't want you to stay? They stared at each other for a long moment. Then she reached up and touched his cheek, gently. I'll decide for both of us, she whispered. The next morning, the world found out. A headline, a photo, a caption that read, Billionaire heir marries quiet Lagos woman in private ceremony. But no one knew what happened behind the doors of the estate until the video leaked. The video was only 3 minutes long. Grainy. Shot from behind a curtain at the Obesai Estate Chapel. But it spread like wildfire. Not because it showed wealth, but because it showed truth. In it, Chisholm stood barefoot at the altar. Her dress was simple ivory cotton, no lace, no diamonds. Kelechi stood opposite her, frail but smiling, his eyes never leaving hers. No crowd, no press, just one priest, a whisper of I do, and a kiss that felt like a sigh after a long cry. The internet didn't know what to do with it. Some called it fake. Others said it was the most beautiful wedding they'd ever seen. And somewhere in the middle of that storm, the truth began to bloom. Inside the Obesai mansion, the rooms felt warmer. Lived in. The curtains were open now. The east wing no longer locked. Chisholm moved through the house like it was hers. Because it was. Not by law but by love. She made pepper soup when his appetite dipped. She held his hand during the fevers. She sat beside him at night, reading aloud until his breathing evened out. And through it all, she never cried in front of him. Not even once. One afternoon, he woke from a nap, blinking at the ceiling. Did I really marry you? He asked, voice hoarse. Chisholm smiled, brushing his forehead. You did. And you still owe me a honeymoon. He chuckled. Weakly. How about the garden? They went that evening. Just the two of them. A small mat under the avocado tree. She wore yellow. He wore a hoodie and socks. They shared mangoes in silence. That's when he handed her a notebook. Inside, sketches. Words. Letters. To her. In case I go before you wake, one page said. If I'm lucky, I'll be there when you read this. But if I'm not, just know I was happy. For once. Truly happy. She couldn't read the rest. She just folded the notebook, kissed his forehead, and held him like the night might steal him. When he passed, it was gentle. In his sleep. Peace. Chisholm sat by the window that morning, the same way she had on her first day here, only this time, with his head in her lap and her hands stroking his hair. He didn't look scared. He looked free. She whispered, Thank you for letting me love you. Months passed. Paparazzi camped outside her home, but she didn't speak. Until the day she walked into a university auditorium wearing black jeans and no makeup and stood behind a podium. I was paid to pretend, she told them. Gasped. But I stayed because he made me feel something I hadn't felt in years. Safe. She launched a foundation in his name that day. The Kelechi Obesai Foundation for Terminal Care. Free emotional and medical support for patients who wanted dignity, not just pills. People listened. Not because of who she had married, but because of who she had become. And sometimes, late at night, she'd sit by the paintings in the East Wing, barefoot, ginger tea in hand, and whisper into the quiet, "You were supposed to die alone, but I'm glad you didn't. You were loved, even if just for a week." And that was enough. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe and don't forget to turn on the notification bell. Thank you. We hope to see you in our next video.